Thanks for joining in the last session. So my name is Aziz. I'm one of the co-founders of STELLASWAP, and I'm going to be presenting about sort of like liquidity staking from the evolution from V1, V2, and V3, and how we are tackling key issues in liquidity staking in DeFi, right, on Polkadot. So just a quick introduction, a single-page introduction. We're one of the leading DEXs, not only on Moonbeam, but across Polkadot. We have the highest, STELLASWAP has the highest cumulative trading volume of 1.7 billion since inception. We have 15,000 as in wallet addresses that has sort of like interacted with us, a good sizable community. And yeah, one of the main tenets of why we are one of the leading DEXs on Polkadot is because we're EVM. We run Moonbeam, and we're very easy to use, right? So you just connect your MetaMask. You don't have to have any other prerequisites, and you're good to go, right, on Moonbeam. So that's why and with the support of Moonbeam Foundation community, we've sort of like grew together. And yeah, this presentation would be focused on how we address the liquidity issues on Polkadot and in DeFi in general, right? So before that, let me just go inside the high-level context of what an automated market maker is. So one revolutionary thing about DeFi is the creation of an AMM DEX, right? Because if you look at a traditional finance, you'd see that it is dominated by an order book centralized exchange. If you go to Binance, you can see the orders, right? Buy and sell orders. The order book, that powers traditional financial markets, right? Now in DeFi, obviously, you have to have a different structure, because it is decentralized, right? And how do you achieve that? You achieve that with the innovation of automated market makers, which was pioneered by Uniswap back in 2016 to 2017. Originated from Vitalik's Reddit post, right, back in 2016 when Ethereum was very, very new. So essentially, how an AMM worked is that any one of us could be market makers. In the TradFi system, right? Market makers are a highly complex and sophisticated job, right? Because for you to create a new market, to create a market or facilitate trading in the market and facilitate depth in the market, you have to have, a huge amount of resources at your disposal, right? And therefore, transiting to DeFi, where anyone could be a market maker, right? A market maker in DeFi is simply a liquidity provider, right? And that is one thing very innovative, but at the same time quite scary if you think about it. Where the power of market making is now in the hands of like normal users, right? Most of us don't even have like, I wouldn't say like the financial literacy for market making, but this is one of the things which we have to balance we have to maintain a trade-off, right? In a decentralized world, this is the main way of liquidity provisioning. And how AMMs work, right? In general, is that a user provides 2 tokens into a pool. Into the pool, right? Manifested by the pool contract, right? And then the output of inputting the liquidity is the LP token, liquidity provision token, which is in the earlier case V1, V2, version 1 and version 2 is usually 50-50, right? Meaning if you put $50 worth of token 1, you'll also tend to put $50 of token 2, right? So it's a 50-50. So it's a very straightforward thing. Right, this is how AMMs work, right? And the premise behind AMMs was a simple formula: X times Y equal K, where the token contain the token X and token Y quantity. Where you look at the curve there, where liquidity providers provide liquidity along the curve, and traders, sort of like take away the liquidity, right? Because as a trader, if you want to swap something, you take away liquidity by inputting a token A and getting token B, right? So basically, this is the first sort of like innovation in DeFi, which is AMM, right? That gave rise to DEXs like Uniswap and any other DEXs down the line via CPMM, which is constant product market making, right? Now, then we have, what is the difference between V1 and V2 AMMs, right? Right now, it's common to hear V3 AMM, V2 AMM, right? But what actually is the difference between V1 and V2? Really simple. V1, when it first started, it's all about composition of assets, right? Because on V1, token 1 is always an ETH, and token 2 would be an ERC asset. Right, so this means in V1, ETH must always be either tokens. Right, so this gave a lot of issues, right? Because as a user, if you want any other tokens beside ETH, you have to jump twice or 3 times. So if you want, for example, a token ABC using stable coins, right? But all pools needs to have ETH, so you have to jump a few times to get your desired tokens with your desired input. So this was one of the limitations of V1, and that's why V2 was created to sort of like make the composition much more flexible, and therefore ERC20 tokens. So on either side, V2 is basically an improvement in terms of composition of token A and B. Now, why V3 is extremely important? Because as you can see at the sort of like liquidity curve, right? Right now, with V3, and V3 was sort of like a, V3 right now is the most efficient way to provide liquidity in DeFi. Why do I say that? It's because with the launch of concentrated liquidity, we call it V3, concentrated liquidity, which literally means that you can concentrate your liquidity along the curve, right? So what this gives, what is the difference between V3 and V2 is the power to choose your liquidity range. In V2, you could not choose your liquidity range, which means that your liquidity distribution is from price 0 to infinity, right? So this means that you don't have the option to concentrate your liquidity. Now, but the question would be, why do I need to concentrate my liquidity? Well, imagine if you were to provide liquidity, what is your main aim? Your main aim is to ensure that your liquidity is used as much as possible so you can earn trade fees, so your liquidity is active, right? But in V2, your liquidity is stable across from 0 to infinity, right? So if the market price is at this range, right, your active liquidity is minute compared to your overall liquidity, right? And therefore, V3 allows you to concentrate your liquidity. And if you stack them up, you stack all the liquidities of everyone, right? You would see a bell curve, where at the center of the bell curve is the current market price. Now, this, if you're aware of TradFi, right? In order book systems exactly look like this, a bell curve, wherein most liquidity is centered around the current market prices. And that is why it's extremely efficient. Why? Because whenever the current market prices at the center, and people are obviously trading at the current market prices, the liquidity here is at the most, right? And therefore, there's huge amount of liquidity depth at the current market prices as compared to the tail end. So this means that there is optimum or maximum liquidity depth here, meaning lower slippage for traders, a lower spread, right? And that is how order book exchanges are extremely efficient, right? Because of the liquidity curve. And that's why V3 in DeFi, V3 DEXs are comparable to the efficiency of centralized exchanges, right? Because of the way liquidity is distributed. In fact, if you were a liquidity provider in DeFi on V3, if you were to concentrate your liquidity at current market prices, you will earn the highest amount of fees as well as your rewards. This means you get like the bang of the buck here. But what's the trade-off? There's always a trade-off in these systems, right? The trade-off is that if you were to concentrate your liquidity, your impermanent loss would be high. So imagine you're at this two range, right? You concentrate your liquidity here, but if the market price suddenly shifts because of a black swan or because of a macro event, your liquidity will suddenly be non-active and you won't be earning anything. So that's impermanent loss. Basically, your liquidity becoming not active and you will be earning zero, right? So that's one of the, that's basically V3 for you. In essence, V3 gives you the option to choose your range. You can choose the traditional 0 to infinity range, or you can concentrate your range to earn much more, but it's all up to you. It gives you the power to choose where you want to put your liquidity. High risk, high returns, low risk, low returns. So that's basically the, I mean, in finance, right? That's the financial sort of like dogma. Now, so we transited to V3 at the start of the year, at the start of last year, and we basically use the tech stack of Algebra, which is a competing Uniswap V3. So one of the main differences, the core differences of why we chose Algebra's V3 was because Algebra used adaptive fees, or dynamic fees, which means that because Uniswap V3 has the different fee tiers where you can provide your liquidity in. For us, it's just a single pool tier where fees are dynamic, right? So this makes, because look, listen, as liquidity provisioning is already hard. As a user, you go to Uniswap and you want to provide liquidity, right? The trade-off or the constraint of understanding what is the different fee structure, why I should do that, and how important is it for me to choose one over the other is something that we want to abstract away. And that's why we chose adaptive fees, because you don't have to think about that. Fees are dependent on key macro stuff, volatility, market, risk, which has all been integrated into our fees, right? So we want to abstract that complexity. And that's why, thanks to the adaptive fees, I mean, for most of the times, our fees are much lower than any other DEXs in Polkadot or even across DeFi, where you can see that traditional fees on DEXs are usually hit 0.3%, but ours are usually around the range of 0.26%, right? And yeah, with the launch of the V3, this is how we launched V3, and we also had V2 and stable AMM. Stable AMM is obviously for stablecoin assets, and we built a router across, because each AMM is its own siloed liquidity, right? So we built a trade router to unite liquidity across all AMMs, so that whenever a user wants to trade something, right, all that matters in the backend is that they get the most efficient trade routes, which means lower slippage, lower fees for them. So that's what we did to abstract and to unify liquidity to ensure that users get the best prices when they want to trade any assets on STELLASWAP. Now, again, going back to the issue, okay, V3 is super powerful. It's super efficient. It is like a centralized exchange order book, right? But obviously the caveats is that it is super complex, right? And our main aim is to really simplify everything in DeFi so that anyone can do stuff on DeFi. So the two main things that are obvious in this relationship, right, with launching V3 is complexity and ALM integration. So ALMs are basically active liquidity managers, right, which makes staking much easier. We need ALMs, so that is one of the, we need ALMs to make liquidity staking easier. Now, why was V3 more complex, right? In the traditional V2 AMM, where a user provides liquidity and mints the LP token, right, and his his earning, right? 50-50. But, you know, and you can use a protocol like Beefy, a yield optimizer, to auto-compound your rewards and fees. It's a very simple thing, right? You can stick directly at us and LP your LP token on Beefy, or you can stick directly on Beefy, which will put their liquidity on us, right? So on V2, it's a very simple affair because Beefy would just auto-compounds your rewards, right? It's a very easy thing. It's a symbiotic thing where we work well with Beefy and other yield optimizers to optimize returns. But with V3, it was very complex, right? We raised the issue in our cycle of grants to the community, saying that when we launched V3 and we understood that ALMs are crucial to simplify liquidity staking, but the main thing about ALM integration is that connecting to other ALMs requires a separate economic model. So what does that mean? It means that when we talk to ALMs, right, and for them to support our vaults, they would want, we would essentially need to segregate part of our rewards and incentives to that specific ALM. So this hasn't happened before in V2 AMM. So, and this is one AMM. Imagine there's 10 ALMs. Sorry, imagine if there's 10 ALMs. We would have to maintain 10 separate segregation or encumbrance of our rewards incentives, which didn't make any sense, right? And therefore, what we needed to do was to streamline rewards distribution under V3 to make sure that ALM integration is as streamlined and efficient as possible. And that's why we set out to create our own off-chain rewarder infra. So what does this do, right? So this has been under development for the past 1 year. It's a solid 1 year, right? So what we did was to create an infrastructure where we can actually look to see in an off-chain manner any stakers, whether it be users or ALMs, right? And then we would distribute the rewards accordingly from our rewarder contract, right, to any users, including ALMs. So this is a complex thing to do because we needed to make sure that the off-chain rewarder would query, all available stakers, including users, any users, as well as ALMs, to see how much they are owed and then distribute those rewards accordingly when they claim, right? So this piece of infrastructure is important to connect to all ALMs without requiring us to create or maintain a separate economic model for rewards and incentives, right? And yeah, this basically, in a nutshell, with an off-chain rewarder, reward distribution is from a single point of distribution, which was from us, which was the relationship in V2 AMMs, right? And that's what we wanted to maintain because there was, coincidentally, when we raised this last year, 1 year ago, right? And a new ALM was coming to Polkadot, right? And it was selected by the network. I think at the start of this year, that ALM was hacked, right? And that was exactly what we said, It was a security risk if we don't create our own off-chain rewarder, whereby if an ALM was hacked, our rewards that we have segregated to the ALM would also be compromised. Right? And that was the thing that persuaded us and also persuaded the community to jump on the idea of building our own off-chain rewarder so that doesn't happen again. We limit the security risk vector. Right? And also, at the end of the day, we want to create a level playing field for any other ALMs. Right? So if the ALMs are basically distribution points, Beefy, Gamma, Arrakis. Right? So if they bring in the users, obviously reward distribution will go to the users. Right? But without off-chain, it's quite unfair because then there would be favoritism amongst ALMs, that will get grants, blah, blah, blah. So off-chain was an obvious choice for us to sort of like go ahead with and create and to streamline that. Now, and a sort of like a core benefit, right? I've been talking about ALM integration, which is all backend, right? A core benefit of off-chain rewarder, right, to streamline rewards distribution for V3 staking, is that it streamlined DeFi, the user experience of staking, right? Which was also present in V2 AMM, by the way. So previously, in any V2 AMMs, what you need to do was to create an LP and stake that LP, which is basically an ERC token, into the farm to start earning, right? If you miss this step, if you create the LP token and you don't stake it into a farm, you will not earn token rewards, which makes up the most of your yields, right? Besides the fees, you will only earn fees, but usually they are minor compared to the as in token emissions, right? But with off-chain, you remove the need for farming. So immediately after you create the LP, you'll start earning. So that basically we are erasing one step in the traditional yield farming process, and we're very proud of that because our aim is to make life much simpler, and removing one key step away means that you're removing one click, right? You're removing one thing that user needs to do, right? And that's part of our philosophy in making life much easier for the users. And beyond that, as I said, with the trade-off of V3, right? Of it being super complex, why? Because you have the ability to choose your range, right? And that we wanted to highlight the relationship, right? So the selection of range would depend on your risk-reward profile or your risk profile, right? So if you want to be conservative, where your liquidity is distributed across a wider range, you'll be safer from impermanent loss from the risk of your liquidity not being active and not earning, and therefore you'll earn a reduced APR. But at an expert mode where you want to be hyper concentrated, you will earn a higher APR, right? But your liquidity is at risk of becoming inactive if prices are very volatile. And with off-chain rewarder, finally, we would be able to connect to ALMs, which is a core infrastructure in V3 staking. And what does ALM facilitate? Automated vaults, right? So as I said, right, if you are a liquidity provider and you are out of range, you are not earning. What you can do is that you can go to one of our ALM partners, after our off-chain integration, that they would manage your liquidity automatically, right? So we call this automated vaults. So this is another key thing that will open up the floodgates of liquidity for us and for the ecosystem, right? Because obviously, this makes life easier. You don't have to care about manually managing your APRs. You can use, for example, Beefy, our main partner, to automate your liquidity provisioning, and in fact, they will auto-compound your rewards, which means that they are constantly maximizing your value. And this is what, this is a key thing with that we've been working on for 1 year, right? Because with the off-chain rewarder, we can actualize the partnership with ALMs that facilitates automated vaults, which means that you can literally earn in your sleep and not care about being out of range and not earning. And one of the key enhancements by working with our partner, and Beefy has been one of our key partners in this. We've talked to them for the past year and a half, 2 years, to come into the ecosystem on Polkadot to deploy their vaults, right? And it's been a very tiresome process, but we finally did it, right? And one of the key things that they also have, which we've integrated as well, would be a ZAP, single asset ZAP, which means that instead of having 2 tokens and then putting them together, all you need is 1 token, and then they will do the rest. They would divide your tokens, create that LP, right? So ZAP, single token ZAP, is something very innovative by Beefy that will allow users to stake into our pools effortlessly, just with a single token, right? And this is where we've sort of like worked together with Beefy to facilitate a much more simpler and cleaner user experience for users, right? And to close up, our off-chain rewarder is literally hours away from being live. So this means that once it goes live in the next few hours, Beefy will activate their automated vaults shortly, within a day or 2. And then automated vaults will be live, which means that we would be ripe and ready for the $1 million DOT incentives that STELLASWAP had, the Polkadot community gave us. And then we could launch the DOT incentives very, very soon in the next coming weeks. So yeah, check it out, STELLASWAP, and then just await for the follow us on Twitter, await for the news of the impending DOT incentives campaign. Thank you.